We're now going to move on to our filling the emotional tank. And our first slide says, which car would you rather be driving? So my question to you is, you're now Saturday morning on your way to your favorite yoga class, and you go out, and there's two cars available to use. You jump in one, and oh my gosh, the tank is empty. Go in the other one, and the tank is full. So you have a decision to make. Which car would you like to take to yoga today?
I have to say the full one.
All right, so did you evaluate the situation there?
I did.
Okay. It's very important to remember that word, evaluate the situation, because
Okay.
the point of a coach's interaction with the individuals is assessing their emotional tank. And although we don't have a slide that directs us that way, I think that's an interesting point that I would always add.
Yeah.
It's up to a coach or the coaches upon arrival each day to assess where the individuals are and where the team is. And that can change 180 degrees, whether it's the day before the prom, the day after a loss, the day the first snowstorm, the day of grades coming out for midterms. So you have to be aware of what is the emotional level of the players as well as the team. So how do you know when a tank is full? What are some of the characteristics that you would identify with a full tank?
I think the players they'll be excited to be there. You can tell from their body language. I always say they look like little puppies. They're just, their tails are wagging. They're excited. Yes, coach, whatever I can do. They're just quick to jump on things.
Right.
And they're happy. They're just happy.
Realize the interaction with each other and the interaction that they have. There's also a thing called a smile and a frown, and so the smile is always a key indicator. And what would you imagine if you saw some players walking towards you from the parking lot where they join you and their tanks are empty?
I would say heads down, just lethargic, not enthusiastic. And I find my team, the girls especially, they pick on each other. Yes. They pass blame quickly.
They're arguing with each other. So that's one of the ways you assess. As a team joins you physically on the field, you can take a glance at what the majority, and in particular, one of the things that I use is I ask my captains when they first arrive at the field. Usually they get there fairly early because they drive, because they have cars, the seniors. And I ask them the highs and lows of the day at the school. So in many cases, they already have the social connection figured out, whether it was the day that people are being asked about prom or some other hot spot that the school had. So I use them to give me a little bit of a radar. And then I say, do you know if anyone in particular is having a good day? But more importantly, is anyone in particular having a bad day? Because the school that these kids work from is a very close physical as well as classroom to the lot. It's a very small space. So they're very much in tune and in touch with each other. So that's real important, is to do that assessment, I believe. Typically, as we go on to the slide 2, introducing the principle fill in the tank, there are 3 characteristics. An empty tank is a pessimistic kid that gives up more easily and is less able to be coachable. The key to that is coachable to me means not accepting of learning. They're the kid who lags behind when you say, okay, everyone come here. When you ask them to get a partner, they're always standing around thinking, I don't really want a partner. I don't really want to do this. So there's a lot of characteristics you look out for the individual that way. When they're filling the tank, or when they have a full tank as they appear, they're very optimistic and, like you say, energetic. They want to be involved in a game. They want to get to practice. They want to get to work. And they can deal better with a challenge. Most importantly is they're there willing to learn. And if you can't create the culture where they're willing to learn, you're really going to struggle. So no matter what the practice plan is you have together, or whether it's fantastic or just sort of a high rep, no energy kind of practice, that is really going to be affected by the emotional tank. And you don't really have an control of that as they arrive. So how do you work on changing that emotional tank? It's important to recognize if a child has a problem that we work as a group, and I identify with my assistant coaches right away a particular player that I might have been told or that I recognize, and often I'll go up and speak to them and say, hey, how was your day? And right away, that next second tells you up or down. So I communicate with my coaches to keep an eye on whatever person to do that, to keep an eye on them and try to fill that tank. So we've identified the principles, and now what those characteristics look like. And our next slide would be coming up. That talks about, who are you laughing at?
She just, my daughter just turned the light out on me. She walked in my office and walked out the door and turned the light off.
Now we're going to talk about the things that drain a tank. So draining a tank means you are not supporting that kid in a positive energy way. And the kinds of things that will drain that tank are criticism and correction. They are sarcasm, although I often use sarcasm in a positive way, but it's really for young kids. They don't understand that mechanism. Ignoring a child completely, turning your back on them. And then there's various other nonverbal. So Kelly, would you give me a nonverbal example of a draining of the tank? Okay. Like definite disappointment in your facial and hand expressions there. Mm-hmm. Okay. Things that will fill the tank, though, are truthful praise, being sure that you're expressing appreciation. And I'd like to add one thought here. It is so important that with a team, particularly from the very beginning of the season to the end, that you express how much you care about them. You don't have to use the word love, but the word caring about them as individuals and as the team. And this, to me, is one of the most important things you establish with the team, because if you don't have that understanding of care with each other, you're going to have a lot harder time to fill that tank. And there's a quote in the book I'd like to use: people don't care what you know unless they know you care. So you could be the brightest tactician, known more than them by 5,000-fold. But if you don't show that you care with them, you're not going to have a good rapport. And that's going to make it much more challenging to fill the tank. Listening to an individual is another sign of filling the tank. And Kelly, as an example, can you show me a nonverbal that would fill my tank?
Yeah.
Okay, we got a lot of hand movement and a yeah. And I think that word Y-E-A-H is one that I have picked up out of slang lingo, and I'm using, and it's just the inflection in the voice. I'm like, yeah. And however you grill that way, that to me is a new term for filling the tank with the sound. A lot less words, but a real positive way to express concern about that. So we know that we need to fill the tank of these individuals so that they will learn better. And we don't want to deflate them. We want to inflate their emotional stability during a tank. All right. So we've talked about what fills it. Let's go on and take a few more examples of that. All right. I just switched my slide over here. Okay, I want to give you a true story. And this is one I remember from my very early years of coaching. I had the opportunity to go to a college, and I'm working with a very high level of collegiate athlete in the sport of lacrosse. One of the players was naturally a very gifted athlete, and she was on the U.S. national team. And I am like, wow, I'm so excited to work with this kid who's already been recognized and selected. But what I found myself doing was putting extra critical pressure on myself to make her better. So one day after practice, I go back to my office. She comes in and she is crying. This is a 21-year-old individual, and I am like, what happened? And I was thinking of all the things that could have happened to her life, but what she said to me really hit home. She said, "Coach, you're always criticizing me. I don't know what it is that you like about me. All you're doing is telling me what to do better, what to do wrong, what I am doing wrong and how to change it." And at that point, I realized a light bulb went off, that I was essentially overcoaching her in a skill critical way, but I never worked with that in praise. And so her reception of that was that I don't like her, because all I did was criticize. And she said purely to my face, "I don't think you like me." And just the opposite. I cared so much about this individual, but I didn't establish that care. And secondly, I didn't know how to criticize a player with a constructive way about it. So I learned very quickly something which in this book is considered a sandwich. And I have always since then practiced saying something about the positive of what they're doing, with a correction. Then I'll turn around and keep giving that go back to work and get it right. And a real positive energy statement to them to perfect or work on what I've just made as a criticism. And that was a big change to me and has stuck with me now for 25 years. I know it's a great way to go. So after a lot of research, I've now switched to the ratio page. We have come up with what's called a magic ratio. And this magic ratio has been documented in many studies over many years through education, through business settings, and also through educational institutions. It applies as well to sport. So I'm going to give you the opportunity to take a wild guess, and you don't know, of course, anything about this.
No.
What is this magic ratio? Is it 1 to 1, 1 to 2, 1 to 3, 1 to 4, or 1 to 5? Go ahead, guess.
I'm going to say 3.
Yep, that's would have been my natural instinct as well. But according to all of this years of study, the magic ratio is 1 to 5. One criticism has to be supported by 5 positives in order for the emotional tank to keep filling. Anything less than that, you are likely to be draining the tank. That is a very hard number to come to. And some days you may not get there. Other days you might exceed on that. Certainly on a day where your team wins a game, you're probably on the more than 5s. But you have to learn to balance all of that throughout a season. One of the ways that I think that you can evaluate yourself is to have someone tape record a game and ask the tape recorder to be sort of behind the scorer's table. It'd be great if they're elevated, but be sure the volume is on. So don't just evaluate the game tape as to what's happening on the field, but take the visual part of the game out and listen to yourself. All right. The other way to do it, which I found even more important, was to have someone tape from the other side of the field and focus on the bench, not even the game. And this is really good to do in, say, in a scrimmage, or at least for 10 minutes, say, just focus on me. I don't care about what's going on in the game. Now, you won't actually hear yourself from that distance, but you'll be able to see the team, and that being all members of the team, plus all the coaches, and how they react to various situations on the field. As in being scored against, how do you react? You score a goal, how do you react? A player comes off the field, who or how do they deal with them? And I think that's a really positive learning tool to use, particularly for veteran coaches who have a little bit of time to study that. Another way that I've done it, and I actually did this back in my earlier college days, is and now that our phones can do all this, I recorded myself during practice. And I didn't do it in the beginning part. I did it like during the scrimmage because I was really concerned that I wasn't giving positive feedback during scrimmage time in practice. So the last 20 minutes of the game, I put the tape on, threw it in my pocket. And I was amazed I did not reach the 5 to 1 ratio. Mm-hmm. But it's something you need to strive for. If you don't strive and understand the value of filling a tank for an individual so that they will perform at the best, so they will be the most energized, optimistic, wanting to learn. If you don't understand that principle, it's going to be a struggle for you to be a good coach.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you very much.
I don't know how long it was, but
it was like 11, almost 12 minutes, but that was perfect. That was great.
Well, I did an example that you've used about, filling the tank, emptying the tank, filling the tank, emptying the tank. Mm-hmm. I like to challenge myself with new things. So yeah. I was not going to repeat that.
That's good. That's good. I'm learning. I like this, just giving people 10 minutes, because a lot of the trainers or the people in the course that have been doing this have been getting to try little things or try little stories, and people are not just going by what I did, which I think is great. I love it when people are trying new things. So I've been joking, and I told you this too at the lacrosse workshop. Half the time I'm evaluating, and half the time I'm stealing ideas and quotes and thoughts. So right. I love it. I love it. No, I thought, obviously I think you did a great job. I really like the way that you actually are funny. You have a very calm demeanor, but then every once in a while you throw in a smile or I guess it's your dry sense of humor or something, but I connect with it. I like it.
Well, I tried to put it on an emphasis. Like at the summary, I summarized, which I find that I don't usually do when I do in these presentations. We just go from the next one to the next one.
Right.
One of the keys to myself, having just done a clinic 2 weeks ago, was you got to summarize and wrap it up. Mm-hmm. That's where I raised my voice and said, that's where you got to show the energy.
Yeah. And I think you're going to find too, like you'll enjoy doing these because it's only 90 minutes and you're done. You don't have the people for 8 hours all day long. So you do have a much shorter amount of time. I don't know how many of those you do that are shorter, but you have a much shorter amount of time than like the US lacrosse ones that are all day. So you do kind of have to do it into chunks and summarize as you go. And you're used to doing the PCA part in 1 hour. So you can actually spread out a little bit and you do have a little bit more cushion there. I really like the way, which I didn't hear you do the last time, when you were just talking about like stories, personal stories. And I said this to a couple of the coaches that we have, especially in this course that have been coaching as many years as you have. Anytime you have a story of something that you've done, when you have credibility as a coach, it's that much better because you're going, wow, this woman's been coaching for how many years and this works for her. I have to do that. So it's almost like instant credibility. You know, Mark Newman was talking about things he did when he started with the Yankees, and you're like, I got to write that down because that was awesome. You know, it's things like you're going, wow, if it works for him, it's going to work for me. So, you know, pulling the captains aside, taking the time to do that, I think is something that a lot of coaches, as you said, especially newer coaches, don't think that how crucially important that is. So I think that was great the way you specifically said, is anyone having a bad day? Checking in, using your captains, because they are the eyes and ears of everything. And even now with phones, the girls probably posted it all on Instagram last night that their boyfriend broke up with him, and you already know going into it who's having a bad day. But
that spreads quickly in a girls' school.
Whew, no kidding. The one I had a couple things just to add to what you're doing too. One of the things that I was at University of Scranton, and they did a whole study on college recruiting, and you probably know this as well, but they did a study of 500 college coaches to find out what are you looking for the most when you're doing your recruiting. Yeah. And the number one, do you know what the number one would have been? Coachability. Yeah, coachability. So I thought, you know, I've been adding that in because it's so crucial to this principle, is to help make the kids more coachable, and that's the skill that actually colleges are looking for. So I thought that was interesting to add in.
If you're with the right age group that you're presenting to, like high school coaches or you know, in general, that would be a very good point. When you deal with the youth coaches of America, you don't want them thinking of that yet.
Right, although they are. My 9-year-old's going to be recruited to play D1. How can they get there? The one question I have is, though, I would love to hear you use an example of how you use sarcasm positively, because that's been a big debate with PCA on how do we, even the word, and we've talked about this, even the word criticism. Is criticism always negative? Is sarcasm always negative? And, you know, I would argue no, if it's done the right way. So if you're going to say, because I'm a sarcastic person as well, if you're going to say, you know, I think you can use sarcasm positively, and I heard you mention it, I would give an example, because I think some people might just assume like, oh, I'm a sarcastic person, I have a good relationship, you know, my girls don't take it seriously.
Here's the one I have used most often. Someone shoots a fairly weak shot in lacrosse, and I say, man, if I was in the cage, I could have stopped that shot.
Right. Okay, so that's a good example.
And I thought about it actually, but I didn't say it. But you know, or my grandmother could have shot harder than that. I mean,
yeah.
And I use it frequently, so it's not to one kid. Mm-hmm. They're like, hey, Aaron, my grandmother, and they kind of laugh because they know what's coming next.
Right. But I think the crucial part of that too, and you said it, they don't know, you've earned the right to be heard by them. You've earned the right because you show that you care. And I think that's where I always frame sarcasm as, you know, if you have a positive relationship and you're close to that 5-to-1 ratio, you can throw in some jokes and throw in some sarcasm, and the kids will take it. They'll laugh. They'll think it's hilarious, and that'll motivate them. But as you said, if you're one of the coaches, like you mentioned with this U.S. lacrosse player that said, you know, do you ever say anything positive? Is there anything you like about me? And then you say, hey, my grandmother could have shot better than that. That's going to be taken as a negative. So I think it's a good point to bring up. I know we've debated about just the terminology on the slides. Mm-hmm. Do we say sarcasm is always negative, and is criticism always negative? We've actually gone to more of saying criticism in and of itself can be a tank drainer. Critique and feedback are positive, but the word criticism itself does have a negative connotation. However, if it's framed in the relationship and the relationship is a positive one overall, then you could probably get away with being a little more critical than normal.
Yeah, and there's one that we used to use on all of our U.S. lacrosse coaching prep work before we took more time to add the PCA, and it was the but word. Mm-hmm. And I often would have used that as an example as well of one of the ways to really change your coaching communication. Mm-hmm. It makes a huge impact.
Absolutely. We call it the power of the big butt. And I don't know if it's in this workshop or if it's in the double goal coach 2 or 3, but yeah, using the word but properly. And some coaches have said don't use the word but at all, because whatever you say, it negates what you said beforehand. We say flip it around. Say the criticism first and then say but. You know, that shot was not very strong, but I really like your angle and I really like the way you bounced it into the corners, even though it wasn't, you know, you didn't follow through or whatever. So we just call it the power of a big butt just because it resonates with people. Is that similar to the way US lacrosse did it? Did they say don't use it?
Don't use it.
Yeah.
But we've taken that out because we've filled with better stuff that PCA's put together for us. But I was going to use that as an example. I mean, it was in my head as an example of communicating with people correctly and incorrectly. And I just pulled out the sandwich example instead. But
yeah. The only other thing I wrote down was it's so minor, but we call it the 5-to-1 ratio, and on the slide it's 5-to-1, and you said the 1-to-5. So it's not that big of a deal, but just make sure your message is consistent with what's on the slide so that they understand which one's the positive and which one's the negative. And the thing that I think is important to mention there, because I love the way you said, you know, you had all the reasons that having a 5-to-1 ratio is great. You'll get more potential out of your players. They'll work harder. They'll be more coachable. But it's also the reason that it's considered magic. The reason we call it the magic ratio is because the research behind it has found that when you get close to 5-to-1, that's where the light bulb turns on. When coaches get 2-to-1, 3-to-1, 4-to-1, they're getting positives. But in marriages, in classrooms, in music lessons, in all different things, and in sports, when the relationship has been closer to a 5-to-1, that's where you can actually see a dramatic increase in progress.
That's good. I didn't read that point.
Yeah. So I just wanted to bring that. Yeah, because a lot of people say magic and they don't realize the word magic actually meant something. It actually went along with it because all the research over 20 years, it was like that was the magic number. And some research has said you should get closer to a 7-to-1. Other research said a 3-to-1 is fine. So PCA kind of stuck it in the middle with this number 5-to-1 because that's kind of I want something to strive for.
I think a lot is also the age of the individual you're working with.
Absolutely.
I mean, that 5-to-1 may be what you're shooting for, but with the little guys, it's got to be more toward the 7. And the older they get, the more that they know that you care and you're just there to carry them further. My experience has said that you can get away with a 3-to-1 as long as there's a care factor in there.
Yeah, exactly. That probably weighs 2 right there. And just I'd like to bring up examples of how do you get, because 5-to-1 seems really overwhelming for some of these coaches. Just saying a person's name, you know, putting your hand on their back, giving them a high five, they all count as, you know, counting up. So I just like to use some simple examples so the coaches aren't overwhelmed by going, I have 20 kids. I'm supposed to give 60 compliments to 5 criticisms. How am I going to do this? It doesn't work. So I think that's it. The only other thing that I'd love to hear more about is I loved your story of coaching the U.S. player. I think that just connected and resonated so well with so many coaches, because the bottom line was you cared so much that you wanted so badly to make her. So the care was there. It was just the way you went about it. And I think it's such a cool story that, you know, somebody of her caliber and her talent would say, do you even like me? Like, what are you doing? And in your mind, I'm sure you're thinking, you can handle it. You're a very skilled player. I want to make you better. I'm just trying to make you better. So I love the way you use the word overcoaching, because that's always a topic I love to bring up. When are we overcoaching or just trying a little too hard to change athletes? I thought that was great. What I would have loved to hear is the end of the story. So what happened after that? Did your relationship get better? What happened?
The next year she made the team, and in '86 represented the U.S. in the World Championships.
Very cool. And your relationship was a fairy tale after that. No, it's so funny because I hear so many stories, and it's probably just the inquisitiveness in me. I sit there and go, what happened? What about the end? So I think
this young lady came from a very large gifted family out of Boston area, and she went to Harvard to get her master's and PhD in education. No, one master's was there, and then she went to Stanford to get the PhD. So this kid is overqualified.
Yeah.
Find any work. And then what she realized is that she really wanted to work with kids that are underprivileged. So she's working in I don't know what kind of school, but I think my church school, I don't know what, out in Palo Alto, California, earning almost nothing, but enjoying it more than anything.
Yeah. There's a lot of Stanford grads that just have good hearts that are out there in in the nonprofit industry trying to make their way. And I think, oh my gosh, all that money you spend on education and you're not getting any back, but they're doing the right thing. So it's all good.
Type person.
What did you say?
She's a 12-to-1 person.
Yeah, I bet.
And gives to those kids that have no money and whatever, no resources. I'm not even sure what, but she calls me up out of the blue every now and then and says, "Oh, Feff, I just have to catch up."
That's great. That's excellent. And, interestingly, too, I didn't know if you're aware when you were bringing up the tape recording. I think that's fantastic, too, to have coaches do that. We do consultations as one of our services for Positive Coaching Alliance. And that's what we do. I sit there and I'll evaluate a coach. And usually I like to go to a practice and a game or, their choice of what they want to do. And it's really interesting when I do write down how many positives. I do it by timing, almost like a teacher observation. Yeah, and then I write down the timing of the positives to negatives. And I like to share this at my workshops. What I find a lot is that if you break the practice up into 4 quarters, the first and second quarter, you're pretty much at a 1-to-5 ratio, 1 positive for 5 critiques. And then as practice goes on, usually, this is talking about the good coaches, the coaches you would consider a very positive role model. It's still a 1-to-5 in the beginning because the beginning of practice is so instructional. And coaches feel like I have to be so critical, I have to help them. And then as practice goes on towards the 3rd quarter and then usually the scrimmage type situation at the end, that's where the ratio starts to turn to 5-to-1. Where actually for the real effectiveness of the principle, the positive to criticism ratio should actually be higher when you're teaching the skill because that's how the players will pick it up faster.
Yeah, I would say I make a real pointed effort to make the first quarter 5-to-1, much more. I think it sets such a more positive, I want to work harder attitude.
Yes.
Amongst the kids.
Yep.
And when we get to the scrimmage, I'll recognize nice look, good pass. It's not as much directed to a person, just in general, that the kids are hearing me say positive about things off the ball and not necessarily good. I wouldn't say good shot, but it's a great assist.
Yes. Yeah. And that's exactly what you should be doing. And that's what we encourage coaches to do. And that's why I always bring it up when you observe and you actually do tape record or have somebody tape record, be aware of what your ratio is over the course of the entire practice and the timing of it. Because the first 3 consultations I did to these very, very these coaches are known, famous in the school. These are the best coaches we have. They want to just kind of set them as a benchmark. This is down in Virginia. And every one of them was 1 positive to at least 3 or 4, the ratio over the first 20 minutes of practice. And I was like, wow, isn't that funny? And then at the end, they were all, oh, this is great. Good job. Woohoo. Way to go, guys. And I thought, oh, if you could just switch that, flip it around a little bit. Huge difference you'd make.
Well, and I also purposely try to take the first quarter or whatever and make it more individual because you're doing more small group skill development. And then as I mentioned it, when you're doing more of a scrimmage type or situation, I try to positively reinforce the things that you want to see more people do, as a great pass. I'm glad you looked left and right.
Yep.
And not necessarily the end result, which is a goal.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time to be doing this.
Assessing role. If there's any way to get involved in that once I'm into this and trained.
The what role?
The assessing. I do. I'm one of 4 U.S. lacrosse people that, until they changed the plan a year ago, was out doing assessments.
Yeah.
Of our lacrosse, of our 6-hour presenters, their highs, their lows, were they modeling what they were teaching, things like that. So
yeah, absolutely. Because Jason Pratt is our partner manager in this area, and he would be the one that I would let him know that. So I can tell him definitely. Well,
I definitely have experience, and I think one of the things I enjoy the most is helping others get better.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's great. No, I'll let him know. And really exciting is that Philadelphia has now become a location on the website that assigns all the workshops. We used to be considered New York. It was New York chapter. So now, because the Philadelphia chapter is actually hopefully going to be getting started in fall of 2016, they're separating workshops, and Philadelphia region is actually considered its own region now. So it's exciting. It's good. It's moving in a positive direction.
That's great.
Yeah, it is. It's really great.
Are there any employment opportunities to organize that kind of stuff?
Well, there will be. Probably within the next 6 months, the Philadelphia chapter they're going to be starting to, build that up. So there will be, definitely.
Well, keep me in mind when those positions open.
Yeah, well, you'll be in the know because you'll be on all the, staff emails and all that stuff that comes up. So,
Okay.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you, Feffie. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Yep.
And next week, we're going to do